But sometimes it's like that was also my fault because I didn't let people know that I was working on it, or I didn't speak up about it. I didn't make it a big deal. And it's not that you have to make it a big deal, but it's just sometimes because you're doing things on your own, it's out of sight, out of mind.
Let's start this thing, fool. Hello, I'm Sam.
And I'm Amelia.
Welcome back to Us Enjoy podcast where we aim to build better mindset for better relationships.
Yeah, and this week on mindsets, why are you laughing at me? Mindset, I think it's a little more on changing or helping people see a better lens through people who are introverted. And from what I know, we are both introverted. But my thoughts are always that there are different types of introverts. So not every introvert is exactly the same. Not like the shy, the timid, that kind of view. So this one's is really like looking through the lens of people who are introverted.
Yeah, that's right. And I am exactly a introvert to some degree.
I think you were really close to being an ambivert.
What's ambivert again?
You can be extroverted, but you can also be introverted. This is when we did that personality test.
Yeah.
I was also quite close, but like still a little more on the introverted side.
You're more of an introvert than I am.
Which is weird because I actually thought that you would be more introverted.
Clearly, no.
Like this one will come from more personal experiences and what I feel like people see me as and what I feel like is a misconception.
Sure.
So the most common one that has followed me through my whole entire life is that I'm really quiet. And by being quiet means that I don't have an opinion or I'm like quite timid.
And the thing is I have been given feedback that I am very quiet and I am very timid.
I don't know about that though. You always just roll in and be like, yo, what's up, guy?
Nah, but the thing is, I guess depending on where I'm at, I feel like when it comes to a work perspective, a lot of feedback that I get given is that I'm just too quiet sometimes, or I'm very much, I keep to myself. And a lot of people realize after of getting to know me, they realize that I'm not really a quiet person.
Yeah, I'm the same. For me, I stay on the quiet or more reserved side until I get to know people more, I get to know the environment more, then I'm more willing to open up closer to who I actually am. But when I first start, I'm quite an observer, and it's not quite because I choose not to say anything. I think I'm just spending most of that time just observing, soaking things up as a sponge and learning from what's happening around, whether it's a work situation or a new place that I'm going to. That's just how I always have been.
Yeah, and I think I'm somewhat similar. I don't know. I just like to pick and choose, like depending on who I'm with and around, because I was always taught to sort of not really share
Yeah, same.
me.
The upbringing.
Yeah, or not just that, but it's to protect yourself because
Yeah,
I
not
have
to share too
seen.
much.
Yeah, I've seen the opposite where people share too much and it gets used against them. You know what I mean? In a work environment, as an example. And to be an introvert and to be quiet and to not really show and express and get your personal things mixed up with your work, it's really a protection thing.
Yeah. So why do you feel like this is a misconception to you? Like not to other people, just to you specifically?
Yeah, I feel like, the biggest thing that I get given back to me is that I'm too quiet. So I'm not really voicing myself in effect of what my opinions are, what's my thoughts, what's my feedback. And over the time of just experiences, I've obviously had to unravel that from my shell in effect of trying to protect myself. So what I mean by is in an approach of if I'm giving feedback to, let's just say, to my manager, or you sort of observe and you watch and you try to soak up what's actually going on before you provide that feedback, because you don't want to provide that feedback and it's totally incorrect or it's totally inaccurate, then there's no grounding to stand on.
Yeah. What I was asking you though is what is the misconception with us being quiet? Like for you specifically, is there a certain message that you want to share to others in terms of why it's not that you're being quiet. Like, is it because you're observing, or is it because
Yeah, exactly that. So, from what I said before, it's about observing and it's about trying to understand from a holistic point of view. It doesn't make sense if you go out there guns blazing, shooting everyone without really understanding what the story is. Do you see what I'm saying? And I think a lot of people just misperceive that as, oh, you're just, you're not chasing what you want, or you're not being assertive enough to voice yourself. And it's like, well, you relax, mate. It's not because of that. For me, I like to see things from third person's perspective. I like to see things from a second perspective because your vision may not be the right vision that we should be viewing a certain scenario. So that's why I like to slow it down a little bit and
yeah,
and see it from a lens where it's like, okay, well, sure, I feel like this is the right way that I feel at that modern time, but I slow myself down because I want to make sure that have I got my shit sorted? Is it accurate? Should I not be jumping in and making a scene about it if it's not the right scene?
yeah, it's kind of like getting all your right info before you accuse someone of something.
That's right.
Yeah. Another one I wanted to say for in terms of introverted is people get the sense that we're not confident, but I feel like that's not the case. Like if I was to sit here and think about myself, I feel like I can be quite a confident person. It's just that I'm not outwardly saying like, oh, I can do this, or like, oh yeah, I've got this. Like unless someone's asking like, oh, do you want to do this? I'm like, yeah, that's fine, I'll do it. But for the longest time, I think it is also a bit of myself. I never voiced it, but a lot of people in the work sense for a long time, they always saw me as like not the confident person, which I feel like is not the case. I just don't want to be the first person to be like, yep, I've got this, or like, yeah, I can, like, I'll achieve this thing. Like, I don't want to look arrogant. So, unless someone's like, oh, can you do this, or can you help me, or like, do you want to do this? Like, I want to be invited first before I'm like, yeah, I've got this. I don't want to look arrogant.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but I think on the other side is also taking it on confidently knowing that you can achieve a certain thing. Like I wouldn't take a task without being 100% confident that I can complete it and do it 100%.
No, like that aside, I mean, like just people can see. I don't know if it's also because I'm like a small, tiny little Asian girl that also makes that image of me look like I'm not a confident person. Because I do also feel like I compare to other people who are quite similar to me, that's introverted, who might be a guy in the same character. They don't get judged as much as I would because I'm small and like timid, so they feel like I don't have the confidence unless I actually outwardly say that, I'm fine, I've got this. But generally, it gets misunderstood that I'm not a confident person.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. And I feel like I've experienced that when I was a skinnier guy.
Mm.
And I don't know why the physical appearance has any sort of relevance to it, but I noticed that when I was skinnier, people would treat me differently because if I were to act the same or a similar way in effect of not being assertive in terms of my dominance or assertive in terms of voicing my opinion, they would always assume that I'm just a not confident person or I'm just a quiet or a weak person. And they apply that to my physical appearance. You're not confident or you're not that manly kind of guy.
Yeah. I don't know if it's the same for you, but I feel like being an introvert, sometimes it takes a lot of energy for us to actually prove ourselves or explain ourselves because we're more on the quiet side. Whereas, like, people who are quite extroverted, they do kind of share their feelings on their sleeves or they're more open to say something straight away. Whereas, like, for someone who is more introverted, you may have missed that opportunity where people can see what you're actually feeling. Well, because of that same thing you're saying, where you kind of grab a few evidence before you want to say something. Like just because you felt a certain way the first time, you don't say it straight away and be like, "Hey, that was like I don't like that." You just want to see if it's happening again and again. And
Yeah.
because of that, like sometimes I feel like we need to prove ourselves or speak up a lot more.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from because the personality of being an introvert is one thing, but I feel like the physical appearance had a massive effect too. And I definitely feel the way you feel in terms of the fact of when I was skinnier, I had to definitely put myself out there.
Well, like, regardless of skinny or not, this is also quite separate. I feel like I'm always constantly trying to prove myself or prove myself to others or show that I have value to share.
Mm,
Like, it's like you're writing something, like making an artwork, and you always have to write that justification on why people need to buy this or why this is such a great artwork. And I feel like I'm always on that wheel where I always have to constantly do that. Whereas some other people who might be a bit more extroverted, people can already see that value because they're always talking. You always know about that person. Whereas
Yeah,
like
true.
us as an introverted person, you don't know as much about like what who we are. Like you might know like small little characteristics, but you still need more information.
When I think about it and when I reflect about it, I feel like I kind of am in that situation sometimes at work.
Yeah, I'm in that situation all the time. I guess
Yeah.
my work also puts me in that position. Like being in design and creative, you always have to prove your worth. But being an introvert in that industry makes you have to do it like twice as much. And I feel like I'm always having to do that.
Yeah, the biggest advantage I think some other characters have in the fact of them being able to and share their expressions on a particular moment and feeling so that, people in your workplace as an example would know how you feel. They definitely have a massive advantage because then they're not pressured to explain why they're doing a certain thing because they've already emotionally expressed themselves
Yeah.
in a way where, oh, okay, they've spoken out loud that they are feeling a certain way. Whereas for us, because we're very much, oh, we're to ourselves, we just do the shit, we just do the work. There's no explaining, there's no bullshit behind it.
Mm.
We just do it.
Yeah, which I've learned a lot from the past 10 years that I've been working is that you actually do need to speak up a lot faster. Like these are also coming down into more like tips on how to better or like lean into being an introvert. And one of them that I learned is actually just literally just open up about something. If you're really certain about it, you know that this has happened a few times or from past experiences is what happens. Just speak up about it and it actually gets to the point a lot sooner than having all these people who just misperceive you as a certain way when they haven't even gotten to know you yet.
Well, you do bring to light an important fact is just speaking your mind at that point in time in that moment confidently about how you feel. Like, for an example, if it's work related and you know the process, you know how the fuck shit works, you've been there and done that, and actually bring it up at that point in time will obviously express the fact that you know what you're talking about. And you hovering and consistently sort of providing that feedback, people will hear you out naturally, right?
Yeah, one thing I heard from this recent online conference that I attended, which I thought was really good, and it shows like why sometimes it's beneficial to have some introverts. So this guy, he's like head of product or head of UX, and a lot of people in his workplace has understood how he works. So he's also similar to us, where we don't speak up a lot, and when we speak, it's often with something that have an opinion about or something that we want to share or critique. So people at his workplace now know that if he does say something, then it must be really important or it must be something that needs to be critiqued or tweaked or worked on because other than that, he is just there to listen. And like usually introvert people are really good at listening. So they absorb all the information, they understand things from different point of view, and then they voice something. So that I think that's a good thing that we can lean into as an introvert is that it doesn't mean that you have to be like everyone else and always talk about something or have an opinion. If you don't have an opinion, it's fine. So I thought that was a really good like takeaway how he just accepted how he is as a person and the work also accepted him as a person and even leaned into his opinions and feedback.
Yeah. I think when you're confident and you understand yourself, you accept your fact of how you operate. That's a good advantage or a big advantage for you. And also having the business understand who you are and know how you operate. That's a fucking big bonus at the same time. But I wanted to try and flip this and say, okay, well, what about the people who are maybe potentially introverted or the opposite, who are choosing to stay quiet? Do you think that's a different kind of approach?
Well, that's why I said there's introverted people, but there's also different types of introverted people. There's some people who are actually so like really, really introverted where they are happy not to say anything. They're happy to just follow advice. And I think that's why, like for us, we're kind of in between or in the middle because we are introverted. We stay more quiet until we really have to say something. but we are also like fine to socialize if we have to. I think the only way, like reason why we're introverts is like in at the end of the day after we've done whatever we need to go, we've gone out, socialized, gone to work, we still just want to recharge ourselves, like just recharge with our energy, spend time reflecting. Like that's another quality of introverts is we self-reflect a lot. Like we reflect on the day or the situation or like certain things. And yeah, that's just how we recharge. And I think there are some other people who are introverted who just honestly just love spending time alone, which is fine.
That's a good point. Now, I was just curious to see what your thoughts were because I'm sure there are people out there who are a combination of either role or the extreme end, but just putting it in a working environment, they may not agree with a particular process or something that's happened, but they decide to say, "Look, I'm just going to stay quiet because it's the sake of staying quiet, and I don't want to be involved." Or you know what I mean? Like, I guess from that perspective is yeah where I'm trying to get at. But
Yeah, but at the same time, like if we're talking about that particular work situation, it just depends on how much does it bother them, or do they see a better opportunity, or are they okay with that process even though they don't agree with it? It's also like just knowing themselves and how okay are they with that situation. So I think a lot of this does it being introverted is like just knowing yourself as well.
yeah, but I think before we really talk about that, it's trying to take a few steps back to see, okay, well, what are some ways that we can help to understand that though?
Yeah. Do you have any?
That's a good one, isn't it? Well, I think the biggest thing that helps me is to give an example. It's like if I had an argument with a friend and that friend told me something where I was like, I didn't do anything, I didn't action something, I didn't say something, I didn't express myself. And my friend was obviously giving me shit about that. And I didn't say anything, right? And that could have been a moment where I could have said, hey, this is how I actually felt in that moment. I think the biggest thing is reflecting in that situation and thinking, why did I not say something?
But I feel like being an introvert doesn't always have to revolve around like speaking up or not speaking up though, because I feel like extroverted people could also fall into that situation.
What do you mean by that?
Like extroverted people who are very outspoken, outgoing, they may have also not spoken up about something. Like they might have been at a party hanging out with people, and then they may have not spoken up about a situation where they just talked to a friend and then missed the opportunity. I don't feel like being introverted should be related or be equal to being saying that you don't speak up or you speak up. Like that's just one aspect of it.
Yeah, true. But I think from a perspective of being confident in that moment, because sometimes, well, depending on what kind of introvert you are, you may not be confident in that situation to actually speak up.
Mm.
And that's where the misconception comes from, is the fact that you didn't say anything. And then that person who's obviously on the receiving end has made an assumption on the fact that you were just quiet or you weren't confident in that scenario. So for me, it's like, well, okay, if I was in that situation, then if I self reflected on that specific moment and that's obviously annoyed me, it's frustrated me, or I'm thinking about it. So it obviously means something to me. If I'm self reflecting, then I'm be like, well, hang on. One, why is it annoying me? And then two, it's like, okay, well, how could I handle that situation in a different way? Yeah. How do we self reflect on those moments where we are trying to fix ourselves?
Well, I don't think there's any fixing. I think it's just leaning into understanding yourself, which is what I said earlier. Like, there's so many different types of introverts, and understanding yourself, what triggers you, what doesn't trigger you, or like just understanding how you are. Because there might be those people who are very introverted who are okay to just follow what other people feel or do. And then there are some other introverts, which I say is more like us, where sometimes we might have an opinion, but sometimes we're okay to follow through with the process. And it's just understanding yourself in that.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying there's nothing to really fix. I think
Yeah.
the only thing is really like, again, when you're saying about self reflecting, that's good. Knowing that maybe there's a point in time where you could have done better, but that's not really because of the reason of you being introverted. It's just that you didn't speak up or you didn't do something or you didn't insert yourself to go get an opportunity to go speak to someone.
Yeah, the word fixing is probably the wrong word. What I was trying to say is, how do they identify things that they could help improve or realize that they are doing something that they may not realize? And that's why I use the example of self reflection, because self reflection is really important.
Yeah, I think self reflection is such a big thing. So outside of just speaking up or speaking out, again, like I said, if you self reflect and you're like, oh, how come I missed that opportunity to talk to the manager of blah, 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 or talk to this really cool guy? And you have to really think about it. Like, why did you miss out? Is it because you were too scared to go out there out of your comfort zone to talk to that person? Or did you just didn't feel comfortable talking or going out there? So it's just self reflection. I think that's the biggest thing for introverts who do want to either change something or improve a certain aspect.
Yeah, and that's why I was saying that because of whatever they did initially, which has given a misconception to the
Well,
receiving
like
end.
sometimes even if someone misperceives something, it's also like, does it really matter if they misperceived it as well? Like if it was an important thing, like a job opportunity, then obviously you want to correct that or explain. But if it's something where it's like someone had a view or an opinion about who you are as a person, then like who cares? Like I wouldn't really care.
Mm.
Like it just really depends, like what is important to you and want to improve or what that situation was.
So is that a personal tip from you to really help counter the whole misconception?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing for me throughout my whole life is I know that I'm introverted, but there are things that I always self-reflect on. And my question is always like, what can I do better next time? Or what went wrong here and what can I do next time? That's always a question.
Yeah, and that's good, and that's what I was alluding to before. Because for me, I always self-reflect when it comes to situations where moments may have bothered me in a way of how I handle that situation, and I think of alternative ways of how I could have handled that situation, and it works well for me to counter the misconception in the future.
But sometimes it's not even like a one-off situation. It could be like a bigger thing that you didn't realize, and overly over time it creeps up on you. Like for example, maybe your workplace shouted out someone else, and but all this time you've been also chipping away working on this task, and because you're so quiet, no one knew you were doing stuff about it, which has happened to me many times. Like I've helped people or helped a task or helped a project, and I didn't speak up about it, and I would just quietly chip away at it, work my life away, helping. And then in the end, not that it's bad or I didn't agree that that person got shouted out because they did do the work, but it's also like, hey, how come I didn't get acknowledged? But sometimes it's like that was also my fault because I didn't let people know that I was working on it or I didn't speak up about it. I didn't make it a big deal. And it's not that you have to make it a big deal, but it's just sometimes because you're doing things on your own, sometimes it's out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, and that's right. And that brings up a good point because without people knowing what you're actually doing, especially from a perspective of your team, and if it's a team environment where everyone has to collaborate and do things together, then yeah, the big thing is really expressing the fact that hey, I'm doing this work or I have this shit going on, so help me achieve those goals. Or alternatively, it's to help you tell your boss that you are doing certain things
Yeah.
because then your boss can't really read your mind, right? If you're not saying shit.
Yeah. In a nutshell, I wanted to just make people know that us being introverted isn't that we're being quiet or we're being weak or we don't have an opinion. That's just the main thing. And I think everyone has a different way of doing something. So, like, if you need to take some time to simmer on a question or a situation before you give an answer, what my mistake in the past, for example, that not giving an answer straight away is just like being quiet or saying, I don't know. But I think a better way of doing that is like, can I have some time to think about it? So then at least they know you're thinking about it rather than you being quiet or just saying, I don't know. Then they're like, oh, okay, maybe that person doesn't want to answer.
That's actually a good point because a recent moment for me is I was asked for feedback from someone at my workplace, and it kind of caught me by surprise. And I was like, "Fuck, what do I think, or how do I feel, or what am I gonna say?" And I was like, "Nah, okay, this kind of caught me off guard. Can I have some time to breathe and think about it?"
Mm,
And that sort of put that person in a place of, okay, I now know where you're thinking, so I'm going to give you some time to breathe. And I think it's important to really voice that and actually share that because yeah, no one's going to really read and feel what you're thinking, right? No one's mind readers, unfortunately.
yeah, and I think one thing is in a work sense, especially, I feel like a lot of people have that thought that a lot of people might be extroverted because you kind of have to be social in like a workspace. But it's just that misunderstanding that some people are a lot more introverted, a lot more quiet, doesn't really want to Like, you know, there's small talks, that's not me. And a lot of the times, if I don't join in on the small talk, people think that, oh, I'm not interested, but that's not the case. It's just that I rather listen to people and have that small talk than me joining in on the small talk.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Sometimes there's those moments where you just don't give a fucking shit and you just want to get shit done, you know? So sometimes, yeah, I can see where the misconception of certain conversations or certain moments where people misperceive that situation.
And I think it still continues to happen to me a lot of times because of how I am as a person. It's like, it's really not that I'm not interested or I don't want to join the conversation. I honestly just enjoy listening than talking.
Yeah. I have a very similar experience where, a lot of people would say, "Hey, you're way too quiet, man. Like, why are you not saying anything?" And sometimes, I have those moments where I want to be quiet. I want to listen. I want to watch you guys. Leave me be.
Yeah, or you just like to do your own thing, like enjoy your own time alone.
Exactly. And then there are moments where I'm the flip side and I can be assertive, I can be aggressive, but it just comes down to how I'm feeling in that moment.
I think it's also people understanding each other because it's on the flip side, I guess, like extroverted people, we have to understand how they are too. Like they might get bored because conversation's too quiet, or they might get bored because there's not much stuff happening. And it's just understanding who we are and how each person operates as well is a really big thing for just being in a community and being in the social atmosphere.
Yeah, that's right. I think ultimately, us introverts, we all come from different levels or scales of introverts. But at the end of the day, man, like you are who you are, right? And ultimately, it's about sharing how you're thinking and feeling at that point in time, especially to just express yourself. If you need more time to just communicate how you're thinking and feeling, because sometimes when it comes to like work environments, I can see where that has been taken to the extreme of misconception, but it's important to express how you're thinking and feeling, especially if you're in one of those situations where you really need to tell someone something.
And although it may be daunting to some who might be a little more introverted or doesn't want to speak up, it does become really helpful when you know the right time to speak up as well for yourself.
Yeah. And that just takes like reflection and time because you got to practice that, those specific moments of voicing yourself for you to really feel more comfortable to, yeah, really express yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a good little short episode on being introverted and through the lens of people who are introverted. It's, yeah, really just how we feel as an introvert and what has happened to us, but also let us know if there's any situations or stories that you want to share as well as an introvert, but even stories as an extrovert, because we
Yeah.
want to see what it's like on the other side.
Yeah, 100%. And likewise, thanks for joining us again. And we will see you guys in the next one. Peace.
Goodbye.